Labour's Strategic Defence Review had 3 co-authors. I'd like to ask the Minister a question about each of them in turn. Does he agree with Dr Fiona Hill that there is a bizarre lack of urgency in government defence planning? Does he agree with General Sir Richard Barrons, a co-author of the SDR, that there is an enormous gap between where we have to be to keep the country safe and where we actually are? Or does he agree with Lord Robertson, lead author of the SDR, former Labour Defence Secretary and distinguished former NATO Secretary-General, that the Prime Minister has shown a corrosive complacency towards defence? All of these strong words have been spoken in the past 48 hours. This is no coincidence. The authors obviously understand the principles of combined arms manoeuvre. The truth is, Labour's rhetoric on defence simply does not match the financial reality. We know that in the last financial year, the MOD was forced to make £2.6 billion of crippling in-year cuts. It's now been reported that in this financial year, they're being asked to find a further £3.5 billion on top. That would be catastrophic for our armed forces. Can the Minister categorically assure the House there will be no in-year savings exercise this year? Finally, Labour's SDR published last June promised us a comprehensive 10-year defence investment plan, which is still nowhere to be seen. One Labour peer told me prior to Easter that waiting for the dip was like waiting for Godot, except that Godot finally turned up. So can the Minister now tell the House in what month and what year Labour's much vaunted defence investment plan is actually going to be published? Or is Labour's Chancellor, who is adamantly refusing to sign it, still going to hold our armed forces to ransom? Isn't that why our Prime Minister, who resolutely refuses to overrule her, is all mouth and no trousers on defence?
Minister.
I see the armchair general is out in full force today. Deary me. Mr. Speaker, let me personally place on record again my thanks to Richard Barrons, George Robertson and Fiona Hill for the superb work they did in authoring the Strategic Defence Review. They know, more than many, the mess that his government left defence, hollowed out and underfunded defences. That's not my words, that's the words of a Tory Defence Secretary from this dispatch box admitting the failures they made with our armed forces. But look, in our first year, Labour has boosted defence spending by over £5 billion. We are now spending more on defence this year than any year under the previous Conservative government. Any year under the previous Conservative government. We will hit 2.6% in 2027, 3% in the next Parliament, and 3.5% in 2035. That's a level not seen under any one of the 14 years that him and his colleagues were in government. But let's compare to the party's record opposite. In their first 5 years of government, they cut defence spending by £12 billion. They did long-term damage to our military. They cut our number of warships by 25%, mine-hunting ships by half. They delayed the renewal of our nuclear deterrent. In the 14 years, they never hit once the 2.5% of GDP that we left them when we were last in power. And they cut troop numbers to the lowest level since Napoleon and drove down military morale with low pay and appalling military housing. We are working flat out to deliver the dip, and we will publish it when it is ready. But, Mr. Speaker, we are doing something that was never done under the Tories. We are doing a line-by-line review of defence budgets, publishing not just an equipment plan, but on housing, on personnel, on infrastructure, all in one. This is a Labour government that is delivering for defence.
Speaker, one of the challenges of tying defence expenditure to GDP is that the economy fluctuates. So when Labour crashed the economy in 2008, defence spending on GDP terms went up. So the reality is that as the economy fluctuates over the course of this Parliament and the next one, there could be a challenge in terms of actual defence spending. So as he looks at the defence investment plan, can he make sure that actually the level of expenditure continues to rise so that we actually get the investment in defence that we need?
Or, Mr. Speaker, it's a Liz Truss klaxon moment, isn't it? His memory is so brief that he has forgotten about what Liz Truss and the Conservatives did to our economy only a few years ago. But look, I agree with him that we need to increase defence spending. And let me say to him very clearly, there's not a single person in uniform today, not an admiral, a general, or anyone of any rank who has served in the UK Armed Forces with a decade ahead of increasing defence spending. That is such a sizable change when it comes to our armed forces spending. I noticed the chuntering from the front bench again, being grumpy that it is a Labour government that's increasing defence spending when his cut defence spending, but I will continue happily working cross-party in support of our armed forces.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister accept and agree with the mood of the majority of the British people, and I think the mood of this House, which is to accelerate defence spending to 3% of GDP in this Parliament, not next Parliament? And can the Minister confirm that the year-long delayed defence investment plan will arrive before the summer holidays?
Mr. Speaker, perhaps if the honourable gentleman would like to give some of the money that his former Reform leader in Wales got from Russia to the defence budget, we'd have a wee bit more than we have today.
Sarah Dyke.
Mr. Speaker, Thales employs over 800 people, including 66 apprentices, on its site in Temple Combe in my constituency. Here they develop world-leading sonar systems for the Royal Navy's Astute and Dreadnought submarines, as well as delivering critical systems to enhance the UK security and defence. So given the training capability gap identified in the Strategic Defence Review, how will the Secretary of State increase funding for apprenticeships to ensure we address skills shortages?
Can I thank her for her question and also for calling out and celebrating the work of Thales and her constituency. I've visited a number of Thales sites recently and I've been impressed not just by the management but in particular about the apprentices who feel that there's a bright future ahead of them. She will know that we've announced that Yeovil is to be one of the 5 new Defence Technical Excellence Colleges, not too far from her constituency. That is a £10 million investment in each DTech designed to increase the number of places available for young people to take defence and defence-adjacent courses, supporting not just defence primes, but importantly the wider ecosystem of SMEs as well, because we recognise that by increasing defence spending, we not only want to bolster those large defence companies, but there's a huge opportunity to grow smaller defence SMEs as well, and addressing the skills challenges they have is a key part of that.
Stuart Anderson.
Mr. Speaker, I have served on operations under both Conservative and Labour governments, and I can personally tell of horror stories of how I was treated, which led to 15+ years of complex PTSD. When I finally rebuilt my life, I wanted to see that nobody ever had to go through what I went through. So cross-party, as soon as I got here 6 years ago, I said that anything under 3% of defence spending in the last Parliament, when my government was in charge, I said that that was anything under was unacceptable. There is not a serious professional in the defence industry that thinks the current spending is adequate to meet the world's needs. Does the Minister think it's a serious investment that we're currently making at the moment?
Can I thank him for his question and also for being honest about the consequences of his time in service? It is so important that when any veteran who has served in our forces needs to be able to access help, that they know that help is available. And I think it is platforming and being honest about the experiences that enables more people to come forward. So I thank him for that. He's right that we need to increase defence spending. I want to increase defence spending. We have already increased defence spending, and by April 2027 we'll be spending 2.5% of GDP, 3% in the next Parliament. But I entirely appreciate how the honourable gentleman is making his remarks. I'm very happy talking to him. I'm sure the Minister for Veterans next door about his own experience, see if we can learn and help others in a similar situation.
Sir Julian.
I have every sympathy with patriotic defence ministers who are being sent out to try to put a brave face on the fact that they are being undermined by their own Chancellor of the Exchequer. Yep. Isn't it a fact that someone as collegiate, experienced and patriotic as Lord Robertson would never have spoken out in the way that he has done if he did not recognise that the defence team, his party's defence team, are being undermined in this way? And if the threat from Russia is so great that NATO is now moved to 3.5% of GDP as its target, why does the government think that waiting another 9 years to achieve it is an appropriate way to deal with the killer in the Kremlin?
Well, can I thank the right honourable gentleman? And he's right. We are We've agreed the NATO target, and it is a NATO target of 3.5% on core defence, 1.5% on national security by 2035. We've agreed that, an important part of it. He will also know that the Defence Secretary revealed last week about the covert Russian activities. It is precisely because we can see more threats from Russia and other adversaries, not just against our undersea cables, that we're increasing defence spending, and we're trying to renew our armed forces, dealing with the hollowing out. I know that as a patriotic backbencher, as he now sits, he and I share many of the same views when it comes to the last government's effects of our armed forces, the hollowing out that we saw under the Conservatives. But I'm very happy to continue my conversation with him about how we can make the case for further defence investment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the words of Lord Robertson, we are underprepared, underinsured and under attack. We are not safe. Britain's national security and safety is in peril. I've asked over 6 times when the Defence Investment Plan will be published. I now know the answer. The answer is, we're working flat out. So could the Minister tell me in a time frame what and how long is working flat out?
Can I thank him for, as a Devon neighbour, I know his passion for our armed forces as well, and it's good to see him wearing his Royal College of Defence Studies tie, an institution that I'm proud to be a graduate of as well. He knows that we're working flat out to deliver the Defence Investment Plan, and we'll publish it when it's ready. I would much prefer to get it right than to publish a document that is not right, and that is what we are doing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I say it's deeply unedifying to hear both the Minister and others playing political games with the matter of national security. Look, we can all look at the past. I can tell you about the body armour that I had to give over to somebody else for the invasion of Iraq because we didn't have enough in 2003. I can point to the underfunding of helicopters that meant that friends of mine were killed on operations in Afghanistan because they were underfunded under governments before his, but yes, wearing the same colour tie. We can all point to the past. The question for him is not what happened in the past, but what are you going to do about it in the future? The Defence Investment Plan, the Minister says, is not urgently needed because he's spending anyway. Well, why is he wasting his time in producing the damn thing? He could spare those civil servants to actually get contracts delivered instead of messing around with games, or actually put his heart behind the fight with the Treasury that needs to be had right now, as his own friend Lord Robertson has already made clear.
Well, I really like the right honourable gentleman. Actually, I think he's a very jovial chap, and he raises some good points. And let me say to him, the Defence Investment Plan is needed. It is being worked on by our department. We will be delivering it when it is ready, but we are not waiting for the Defence Investment Plan to make announcements. I've spoken about the £879 million contract I announced this morning in Andover for our Apaches and Chinook fleet, but I could also point to the announcement we made on Friday, a multi-million-pound deal with the veteran-led startup Cambridge Aerospace to provide new missiles to intercept drones, not just for our forces, but for our allies in the Middle East. So when he says we're looking to the future, we are exactly looking to the future, and that is why the Defence Investment Plan will set out the kit and capabilities that we need and will buy for the next 10 years, but also the upgrades that we're making to the kit we have today to give our fighting forces the edge. But importantly, it also talks about how we value our people, something that I don't think has been spoken about enough in defence for far too long, something else we're addressing.
Well-placed sources are suggesting that the number of Type 26 hulls on the order book may be reduced or transferred to our Norwegian allies. Now, I appreciate that Labour has a track record in reducing the number of frigate and destroyer hulls, but nevertheless, will the Minister confirm that there are no such plans and that we will proceed with a minimum of 8 Type 26 frigates, particularly given the increase in Russian submarine activity discussed by his colleague, the Honourable Member for Selyoke, on Monday?
I can indeed, and he will know as a Defence Minister in the last government the state of the forces that he passed over to this government as well. But when it comes to frigates, which, Mr Speaker, I could bore the House on because it is one of my favourite subjects, he will also know that the deal that we've signed with Norway an incredible deal that sustains Type 26 production on the Clyde for many, many years to come, sees not only the 8 British Royal Navy Type 26s, but the 5 Norwegian ones. We're working with Norway on build slots currently, but that will create a combined force, a truly interoperable, interchangeable force. Indeed, the only things different between a Royal Navy and a Norwegian Type 26 will be the language on the signs. That is interchangeability. That is at the heart of the new defence agreement that we've signed with Norway, and part of an agreement about how we can work more closely with our JEF allies in Northern Europe, which I hope can be expanded to other nations as well as we look to sell the Type 31 frigates to more of our partners.
Sir Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Lord Robertson, the former Labour Defence Secretary, has said that we cannot defend Britain with an ever-expanding welfare budget. So will the Minister explain to my constituents why this government is able to set out its welfare spending plans until 2031, but can't publish its defence investment plan for 2026?
I thank him for his question. I don't think Britain gets stronger by pushing kids into poverty. That is the fundamental difference, I see it, between the welfare policies of our two different parties. And so I'm absolutely clear that we should be addressing the high levels of child poverty that we inherited from the last government. That's exactly the right things we should do. And he will also know, because I've said it a number of times, that we're working flat out to deliver the Defence Investment Plan, and it will be published when it's ready. I think he, on hindsight, would much prefer a plan that is ready to be published rather than one that is not. And that is why we're working to deliver our Defence Investment Plan. That will set out spending for the next 10 years up until 2036 or so.